start out with, and for the roll, both Councilman Perello and I are here. We will do the flag salute, and then after that, we will all just entertain a moment of silence in memory of Mr. Juan Delgado. I'm informed that he passed away from complications with cancer. I did not realize he was sick, but he was a contributor oftentimes at council meetings, so we will do that in his memory if you wouldn't mind. Please stand and join me in the flag salute. And Mr. Nyhoff, thank you. We have real flags. Ready to give.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. At this time, we go into public comments for items not on the agenda. We'd like to hold that to a maximum of 15 minutes for all speakers. If there's any speakers, we'll entertain those comments now. Otherwise, if you want to comment on the agenda items, we'll get to you during those particular items.
Can I have just one comment?
Sure.
I don't know if you saw my article about the accounting crisis that came out last. It's my conclusion and analysis that the material impact on the city on day-to-day operations is not that great. There are some huge headline differences. They tend to be mostly in things that aren't even on the balance sheet, or things that don't really impact day-to-day work and the budgeting. Yet that has not really been well communicated by the city, in my opinion. So that there's a sort of like a feeling of alarm. Everyone has no confidence in all the records. That really isn't true. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, but somehow it hasn't gotten out. It's hurting the city's reputation. It's probably hurting our credibility as well.
Okay. And when you do speak, I'll ask for the sake of staff, that I know you, Mr. Miller, but I'm not sure our staff people do so. So when you do speak, please state your name for the record, if you don't mind. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir, Mr.
Steve Huber, just the only question I have is, who's on the video, and are there any other videos that we don't know about?
I was going to introduce
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, she's related to the other slide. They're going to explain all as we go through the process. So. Okay, no other public comments? And we'll move into the agenda. Review and approval of the minutes. Council member, have you had a chance to look at it?
I recommend move approval of the minutes.
Okay, we will accept and approve the minutes. Status update on city's annual financial audit by city's independent auditor, and the recommendation is receive the status report and annual audit by Eadie and Payne. Or on the annual audit by Eadie and Payne, I apologize.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. My name is Hurtado. I'm the Assistant City Manager, and have been working closely with our finance staff in coordinating the audit. We were here before you last on February 10th, and at that time we shared with you some of the discrepancies in our accounting practices and some of the challenges that our auditors were facing, which resulted in us receiving additional help to ensure that we have an audit-ready documentation so that they can complete their audit. And with the assistance of 3 firms, Muni Services, the Pun Group in collaboration with Urban Futures and MV Chang and Associates, we now have a project team to help us get our fiscal house in order and get this audit completed. And so for today's report, I'd like to introduce the 3 presenters that will be speaking to you. Christine Williams is our city's comptroller, who has been coordinating the audit, working closely with the auditor and the subject matter experts on a daily basis. And she'll begin with giving you a status update on what we've done since the last February update. Following Christine will be Eadie from Eadie and Payne, who will be providing you additional detail on where we are with the audit schedule and highlight some of the key findings that they've uncovered so far. And then in the video with using Skype is Vanessa Burke from Urban Futures, who has been on site several weeks now, focusing on addressing some of the key areas of the audit, including cash for fiscal agent, notes receivable, payroll liabilities, and a number of other things. And so we've asked her to join us in presenting the report today because she has, her professional background has been instrumental for us. She actually was the chief financial officer in Stockton when they were going through the bankruptcy. And that insight has really helped us she's been identifying what to look for, where, how to address some of the challenges, and has really helped us speed up doing some of the background that we need to get done. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Christine Williams so she can begin our report for you.
Hi, good morning. I'm just going to start with the status of the project currently. Significant efforts have been made over the past several months, basically since I even arrived at the city, to get basically our fiscal house in order. I am currently the audit project manager, and the city is the lead project oversight with also all of the finance staff assisting. We have been provided consultants to help us with all of the required audit reconciliations and schedules that we currently have to do. Currently, we coordinate weekly meetings with the auditors to make sure that the major areas that we're covering those major areas and making sure that we're making progress. In addition, we do daily updates with our staff and the consultant staff to make sure that we kind of try and make it real condensed and say, are you covering the key areas? Is anything holding you up? What can the city do to assist you to make sure that we keep this moving, we keep it on target, and there's no delays on our side or their side? So we coordinate that on a weekly and daily basis. The largest portion of our records are currently due to the auditors on March 18th. Eadie and Payne will give you an update a little bit later on where our current percentage is, but we have this big, large amount of records to provide to them by the 18th. So we're working on that actively and daily, weekly, to make sure that we're meeting those target deadlines and that we're keeping everybody on track. The audit, they are going to be coming back to the city offices. They've been gone because they're waiting for the staff to provide all of these required schedules and reconciliations. So they are scheduled to be back in our city offices March 21st, and then plan on being here for a couple of weeks to do their required testing and things, because they are unable to perform their testing until we provide them all the required schedules. We have right now, we're anticipating that a draft CAFR be provided by mid-April, and with a final CAFR due at the end of May. And so that's just a little bit of insight as to the coordination and the efforts and all of that the finance staff as well as the consultants are doing. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Eden with Eadie and Payne.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Eadie and Casareno. I'm the innovation partner with Eadie and Payne that's handling the audit of the city of Oxnard. We have been here since September, October, and now we've appeared before you. And again, this is a tremendous opportunity for us to explain to you what the audit is and how we're doing on the update there. Secondly, I wanted to apologize for Don Ecker. He wanted to be here, but he's my partner at Eadie and Payne. He's been, presenting here with me usually, but he's not available today. So I would like to present today the Gantt chart that we normally use when we're tracking our audit progress. And I think this
Just a quick comment, I apologize for interrupting, but I don't know who's my age or my short arms, but I can't read either one of these.
Oh, okay, sorry. Did you have a handout?
Is there a big one? Yeah. Oh, no, I got a small one. Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right, so, yeah. So I hope you all got the handout that has.
It's a bigger one like this.
Separate, it's a bigger page, I guess.
Is there an attachment to this package? All right, thank you. We'll take a peek.
If you can share it, I'm sorry, maybe if there's
There's
not
some extras up here.
enough.
Everybody needs.
That's better, thank you.
So this is a chart that we use to track our progress, and it shows you the enormity of the challenge that the city staff is facing in order for us to complete this audit. There's 61 items in that list. We started on January 18 with a list of 50 items. Now there's 61 because we keep on adding things as we receive information from the city and the accounting assistants. We look at it and we ask for more information. That's how the audit goes. Out of those 61 items, 18 have been completed. So those are the items that are in red font. And I'll read them off to you one at a time. But when we developed this Gantt chart, we also assigned individuals, either from the city staff or the accounting assistants, the consultants who are helping out with the city from Urban Futures, Community Services, and ND Chang. And the team identifies a due date for each of the items. And as you can see, most of them are going to be due within this week and then next week. So the 18 items that have been completed are the bank reconciliations for 8 smaller bank accounts. It's the very first on the list that's red, right there. Schedule of FDIC insurance and collateral deposits from the Treasurer's Office. Updated and complete schedule of Treasury ratings, again from the Treasurer's Office. Accounts receivable aging for utilities. Accounts reconciliation for utilities. Analysis of transient occupancy tax. Analysis of business licenses. Resolutions fixing utility rates. Reconciliation of due to and due from by fund. Resolutions for issuance and repayment arrangements for interfund balances. Schedule of transfers in and transfers out of funds and resolutions approving those transfers. Accounts payable reconciliations, analysis of parse payments for employee and employers for 2 years, analysis of legal and professional fees, updated trial balances, download of journal entries, deferred compensation plan documents and statements for 2 years, pension plan documents and statements for 2 years. Those items have been completed, and that constituted about 30% of this. In the coming week, we expect another 35% to be completed, within this week, and the rest will be completed the week after and shortly thereafter. So realistically, this is a lot of information that is being generated by the city staff and the accounting assistants, and we'd like to thank Vanessa and her crew for speeding up the process, because this has been started back in October or November, but because of the lack of staff and lack of knowledge from the history of the city, that has not been very quick. But now it is moving much further because of the knowledge and expertise that our consultants have provided. So let us just finish before we entertain questions, if that's okay. So the biggest hurdle right now is capital assets, and that's the second item right here. Second big item that is like a big block of blue there. that is our biggest hurdle right now because the information that's being compiled comes from more than just a couple of years. It's going back 10 years when construction in progress has not been updated. And the problem with capital assets and construction in progress is that the internal control has not, pretty much non-existent in the past, where the construction in progress are kept open for years and years, and they have not been closed or taken out of the books. So that process has taken over 6 weeks now, 7 weeks. And it's really hard to get your arms around a lot of information that goes back from 10 years in 6 weeks or 7 weeks time. So that's probably gonna extend 1 more week is what we're looking at. So the next steps, after all of this information has been gathered, the next steps is we come back to do our audit procedures, and that's starting on March 21st. We're scheduling 2 weeks of field work with 3 or 4 people here doing the audit. We're doing our analysis, our testing, preparing the financial statements, disclosures, and then we're also, after all of that, maybe by the end of beginning of April, we will be writing our reports. And that includes the internal control reports, and that includes our findings on the state controller's 79 points that we were looking at from the very beginning. That includes our report for the golf course, River Park, all of the reports that we are supposed to deliver to the city. We will be starting to work on in April. So with that concludes my my presentation. I'm going to hand it over to Vanessa.
Can we ask questions about your presentation before you hand it over, please?
Yeah, Mr. Molina, go ahead.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Vanessa?
Yes.
She can't hear you, so I'm going to stop you right there for a minute. We have a question from the floor.
Okay.
Okay.
A couple of questions. One is from a gentleman that's normally here, but he's recovering from operation, and he basically would ask me, now that you've reconciled the bank, or you finished the bank reconciliations, you've heard this question before, can you tell us how many bank accounts the city has?
We have a general cash pool, that's one. CBC, Successor Agency Fund pool, and then 8 different smaller funds, or 8 smaller accounts with the performing arts. I think there was one from the police and another from another department. I can't remember the exact which ones. But there's 8 more smaller accounts in addition to the pool.
Now, since this is a general law city, and in the state of California, all general law cities and general law counties must have their bank accounts under the control of the treasurer, is it fair to say that each one of these 10 bank accounts are, in fact, under the control of the treasurer, as required by law?
I wonder if Ms. Navas would like to answer that question.
Each of the smaller ones, the police department and the smaller, the insurance claim account, I'm a signatory on those, but I do not reconcile those. That's reconciled by some of the staff in my department, personally.
Well, all right, but it's your department that's doing it. I mean, they work for you, the people who are reconciling it. I don't expect you personally to sit there over the weekend. Okay. And so you sign off on that reconciliation?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. The other question I have is interest income allocation by fund. Are there any particular funds that are excluded from having the interest allocated to them? Because at one meeting
one of the city's very expensive consultants told the audience that they don't get any interest allocation, even though there may be millions of dollars in their fund. And it didn't sound right to me. I wanted to make sure that, because by law there are no exclusions allowed, I just want to make sure, to your knowledge, so including LMDs, Landscape Lighting Assessment District, where there are positive fund balances, they are getting interest allocated to them. Thank you very much.
Theoretically, the allocation has to be done to all the funds that have cash throughout the year. The allocation itself, we haven't seen, so.
You haven't seen it,
Yes.
but you say it's done here.
That will be completed at the end of this week.
Okay, I'm sorry, it's only 95% done, but you will verify, you'll make sure as part of your audit that every fund that has any cash at all in terms of an average daily cash balance is going to get an allocation of interest, consistent with the standard formula, not some other, okay, appreciate that. The other immediate question, and this is more nosiness, I think, on your last page, can you help explain to me a little bit more about the 3 attorney letters to Gibbs, Chronic, and Shute? Are those letters coming in from those law firms, or, I'm sorry?
Yes, we are requesting letters from the attorneys in order for us to determine whether there are any contingent liabilities that have not been reported to us. They will write us back and say whether there is or there isn't. We already have letters to, I think, 12 or 15 attorneys. These 3, we kind of missed those, so we're adding it.
Excuse me, what liabilities from where?
But I think
From
we're just,
claims and liabilities.
Claims.
just shoot.
Thank you. Just 3 quick questions for clarification so I can better understand the chart that you're providing, because I imagine we're going to follow this chart throughout the process. Number 1 question is, this process was re-baselined, so it means there was new dates, due dates, like for instance, the past due for the organization chart for the finance, it says it's at 20%. Normally, I'm familiar with Gantt charts. Normally it has how many days it's delayed, so it's got a minus number next to it. So right now, you started it on yesterday or whatever.
It is a modified Gantt chart. We use it for our own purposes, so that's why we modified it. We just wanted to keep track where our, I'm going to make a general statement here that all of these are past due, because we have requested them from way back in December, and every time there is a due date, it's not, we don't get it. So it's always past dues. But if
Understood.
you have like, minus 30 days, minus 50 days, it doesn't really mean anything to me anymore. So I just wanted to get the feel that yes, this is the next due date that we're asking for, and it's going to be delivered.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. And then project management, usually you put that re-baseline date so that you know that
Yes.
it's been modified,
I actually
which is
have,
okay.
yeah, I actually have a few more columns in there that I kind of did in the interest of keeping it short.
Okay, thank you. The other question was, as you update these charts on a bi-weekly basis or every fiscal policy task force, will you change the colors?
It is updated every single day.
Okay, great, but I guess we can see it online then? Is that what you're saying? No.
No.
Right, we'll see it at these
We
meetings
use it,
every
yeah.
2 weeks. So the question is, right now, you're only highlighting the completed items. A lot of times, from week to week or every other week, you highlight the changes from the last presentation so that we can follow what's changed. In other words, you make it if you change the percentage of past due from 20% to 50%, you'd make that a blue letter, and then we quickly could ascertain what changed, so we don't have to go through each 61 line.
Okay.
And the final question is, could you please explain the colors in the cells? Is that an individual that does that?
Yes.
Or is that?
There's different individuals involved in it, and I just removed their names. to make
That's
this
okay, but that's how you're tracking their time working on that
Yes.
item. So, thank you.
Mr. Molina?
Yes. Someplace was mentioned either earlier or now about the CAFR is going to come out in supposedly April. Now, as you know, the Excellence Award, which is issued by the GFOA, requires that the audits and the CAFR be submitted to them by December. Otherwise, they are not going to issue an award of excellence, which means the CAFR is nothing but your own personal. Have you gotten the GFOA to give you an extension on the submission so that they're going to, in fact, give you an award of excellence if you get everything done?
Yes, we have, Christine has received an extension up till April.
March, you have to do it each month.
Yeah, and we have to get an extension every month as we move along. We don't anticipate that it's going to be finished in April. Our draft CAFR will be within that month, and the final CAFR, when the audit reports, we're anticipating to be completed in May.
Ms. Warren? No.
It mentions here the detailed analysis of PARS payments and also later the pension documents and statements. Do you have those, or what's the most recent fiscal year that you have the PARS actuarials or other information?
June 30, 2015.
Have they issued an actuarial report yet? Are they doing that every year now, or
They're doing that every 2 years. Oh, every year for PARS now.
every year?
The OPEB is every 2 years. The other pension, post-employment benefits.
One of the members of the public asked a question with respect to something is in standard format, you mentioned you have a modified format. Is there anything else that's going to be non-standard in this process, for your knowledge, so that we have something that is not standard?
Well, I don't.
Well, you said, you talked about the modified Gantt chart, that it wasn't a standard Gantt chart. Are there any other charts or forms you're using that you've modified, or are they generally adhering to the normal standards that everybody understands?
If I may just add, the Gantt chart is just a tracking tool. It's a working document that we use internally to track our work and to do the check-ins. It is not like an official, it's just but we thought we would show you the actual working document that we're working off of.
I appreciate that, but just my concerns with everything City's going through, is there going to be anything else that's not standard? I don't want it to be into something that's not standard, because then we can't compare apples to apples.
The answer was, it was a standard chart, but they modified the dates because of the
I
new
understand that,
baseline.
Mr. Hoover, but is there anything else? And I'm receiving kind of looks like maybe, maybe not.
I just don't
Is there a
understand
way
what
to answer that
what
question?
you mean.
Let me-
Is there anything else
I-
that is
Any
not
other
standard?
chart,
Mr. Lynn?
Any other
Well, I want
charts?
to add, maybe,
Our financial statements will be standard.
Okay.
Those are the deliverable reports, official reports that we will deliver. This chart is merely one of our tools, and we customize these tools for our own uses. It's not necessarily wrong to use the customized report when we're using it for our own purposes.
Okay.
Mr. Molina, then I'll come back to Ms.
The second question that I have is on this capital asset. You said going back 10 years. I have a question. If we couldn't find the documents, how are we going about creating documents going back 10 years?
It's not necessarily that we can't find the documents, it just takes time to find the documents and accumulate all of them in one spot.
Have you found any problems with documentation not existing in an attempt to create documents? Because if you do, can you explain that to me? How does it do that?
We can't create documents. Our accounting assistants, your city staff, they can't create documents. If there's information that is not available quickly, it will have to be found. Alternatives could have, there's alternative information sometimes.
Mr. Molina?
yeah, I just wanted to, I think Eadie explained it, but you have to be sensitive. People in this audience don't understand what's in an audit, don't understand necessarily the details of the financial statements and the charts that are required in the CAFR. And so when you address them with a different chart, you may want to say, this is a work, like you said, this is a work chart, it's not in the CAFR, it's just something we use, and that might help in the future to avoid confusion.
Perfect, thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Yeah, my statement's along the same line. The thing we're talking about is not a financial statement, it's merely a project management document. I'm not aware that there is any standard, although some people use Microsoft Project as a standard. That's probably overly complex for what we're trying to accomplish here. There's no sense in making it more complicated than it needs to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, it makes sense that they would frame it for their work, and it's really a work in progress and a tool that they're using as opposed to something official we're gonna put out, so. All right, we're ready to go.
Okay. Now you're ready, Vanessa.
So I just want to talk a little bit, I've got a few slides I want to go through, and, you know, I actually, maybe to lighten the mood a little bit, I ran into a joke the other day that was a definition of an accountant, and it basically said, someone who solves a problem you didn't know you had in a way you don't understand. And so I think that's a little bit with what we're grappling with here is that we're, you know, essentially having the auditors come in and they're taking a look at the city's books and records and determining that there are some problems in there. And that required as well the need to bring in the additional consulting staff to help management to put their arms around it, not so that you don't understand it, but actually so that you get to a place to where the auditor can understand the records and can actually issue the audit and opinion. Having taken Stockton through a bankruptcy the past 4 years, we were somewhat in a very difficult place also trying to accumulate records for our auditors. It took us about 18 months to complete the first audit when I started. And that was record pace going through, you know, a city with a population of 300,000, using the same financial systems that you've got there, the HTE system, which is antiquated, about 20-year-old system. So anyway, on this next slide, and hopefully you can see that up there, what I wanted to do is just kind of put some context around this effort that is going on right now. And really, you know, a typical close process, year-end close process for any city takes about a 5-month period. And what that means is, you know, June year-end happens, it closes out, but there's a period of time, about 1 to 2 months, that internal staff are looking at items that are coming in that they need to adjust within the financial records to move it from essentially all the cash that's coming in during the year and going out during the year to either a modified accrual or a full accrual basis, depending upon the fund type. And what we're talking about, standard and non-standard, is not necessarily the tool that we're using to manage the project, but in order to get the city's financial statements in accordance with what we call generally accepted accounting principles. And some of those principles include things like Eden is talking about, which is you've got to account for your capital improvement projects at the end of the year to determine where you're at on your project. If your project is completed, does it need to be capitalized and starting to depreciate in your enterprise funds or in your governmental funds. And so what we're finding is some of that is lacking. So if you look at the normal process, you know, by the end of month 2, internal staff, which is around August timeframe, should really be starting to reconcile and evaluate the account balances. And I believe Christine started with the city about that time. And they really did hit the ground hard working on that effort. And as they were going through that process, started finding that things were not exactly where they needed to be. In a normal process, by month 3, you're working on kind of your internal analysis. You're looking at those finalized numbers and performing analytical review, because that's where, when you're doing reasonableness analysis and you're saying, does this account look reasonable? Did we collect 12 months of taxes? Did we pay 12 months of rent? Did we collect 12 months of rent? Those kinds of reviews happen at a higher level, really the manager level. And then once you're comfortable at that point, then you get to really the financial reporting stage. And it's at that stage that the auditor, you turn the books over to the auditor, and the external audit of those balances that you're comfortable with in terms of the city's books and records can actually be audited. And I think really, just having been through this before, I think where we're really at is this is a 5-month time frame, and internal staff took a look at the numbers, and around January, we started kind of in the month 2 process. And so we're compressing what would normally take a 5-month process down into, right now, we're at about 2 months, and we hope to be done in another week so that we can turn the records over. And so really, we're kind of hovering really rapidly at a rapid pace between what you see on this timetable is month 2 to month 4, so that Eden can come in with her firm and actually sit down and perform the audit rather than performing the reconciliation. I think what's important to know is that we've got to take a look at the numbers once they're settled down analytically and make sure it makes sense. So when Eden gets there and starts to look at the balances on the 21st, there may be additional requests that come up based on her review. Her review is that kind of higher level 60,000 foot look at the city's financial statements to make sure that they're consistent with the standards and that everything is accounted for within a material amount. So let's go to the next page. What this chart, the purpose of this chart is really in thinking about that compressed time frame to get the city's fiscal house in order, is really to show how many teams of people we have out there and the major areas in more of a consolidated view of the more detailed Gantt chart that you have of what we're working on. And I think what's really the most important thing is as I go through this list and I look at, urban futures, I've been doing audits in local government, state government, as well as serving as a CFO controller for nearly 20 years now. Poon Group is the CPA firm that is aiding us, and again, the partner there has got nearly 15 years of experience. I added his staff up. There is major effort there. Christine has 18 years of experience. So, collectively, if I look at the team that the city has put together to get through this rapid pace, this rapid project, to get the numbers correct and get you through the audit process so that you can move on with life, we're looking at about 7 years worth of collective experience in just state and local government. I don't think you could have formed a better team to get you through there. And I really think what's most important is that the auditor is actually asking for information in the areas that need to be audited. You need to have your CIP looked at, you need to have your debt looked at, your cash investments need to be balanced and reconciled. And so I really feel that when you look at this chart and the things that are on here, these are the things that the audit firm actually does need to take a look at. There is a ton of collaboration on this effort that is underway. We're meeting daily. Christine, you are very lucky to have her here because she is really serving essentially as a project coordinator and each day making sure that everybody is moving forward in the areas in which they need to. And I know having done the same thing in Stockton as we were going through our bankruptcy process and still needing to manage the day-to-day operations, it can be very overwhelming at times. And so, I think Christine is owed a thank you and definitely humbled by the level of effort that's required that she's keeping up with. In that same vein, as we're looking at these significant balances and areas for the audit, we're needing to go back in time. And the reason we're needing to do that is because Eden needs to get comfortable with prior year balances to make sure that those numbers going into this year are correct. So in areas such as housing loans, we have housing loans that can go back as early as 15 years. CIP, same thing. We're rolling that back to make sure that we've got good starting numbers. In addition, RDA, the redevelopment wind down, and having to look at the cutover as of the dissolution date and moving forward. We're having to look at that and verify those cash balances and the due fronts between the city and the RDA to make sure those are supported. There's evidence there that exists to support those transactions between the organizations. And I think last, you see over on the right-hand side is your grants. We've got MD Chang and Associates taking a look at a 20-year Department of Transportation highway grant. That grant is ready for closeout, and it takes a lot of effort to go through and take a look at that. And I understand that the grant person has since retired. So you've got some turnover within staff, and we're trying to supplement that as well. Just in my team alone, I can tell you we have 7 professional CPAs dedicated to the project. They are each coming on board to work on areas of their own specialty. So, you know, we're not giving you the entry-level staff person that is just learning how to do a payroll liability recon. On the cash with fiscal agent reconciliations, you've got a person that ran a debt desk for nearly 18 years for a large city in California, taking a look at those balances. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, you can go rest assured that we're moving forward, we're making progress, we're 30% of the way there. We're going to turn over a slew of records to the auditor. More questions may come up, but really this is what happens as you're trying to get your fiscal house in order. I think really in looking at the project issues that we've encountered as a consultants, I think really what we're doing is essentially confirming what management has already told you. You already had an organizational assessment done that was disclosed to you at the city council meeting. And I think really if you look at that list again, you will see that many of the things that we're talking about are the items that were on that list. For example, the transactions and some of the entries are not always well supported by the records. What that necessitates from you is go back and research. It takes time to research to make sure that that transaction and that entry should have been made, was authorized and should be recorded in the books of records and show up in your financial statement. And that takes time to drill back through, get to the right people, get to city clerks, deal with, get to the city manager's office to do that. And housing loans is a classic example. We got to make sure that those housing loans that we're given are out there and still should be out there, that they're not in default, that the foreclosure proceedings have happened in order to validate that that balance should still remain on the books. The other issue is staffing capacity to manage both the day-to-day operations and the audit project. We're without a CFO currently. Christine is shielding that burden for the city. And on top of that, she's still got to cut payroll. She still has to issue checks for the city. She's still got to pay debt service payments. And so on top of this massive effort, she's having to manage the day-to-day operations within the city. And so really just having the limited capacity, we're working really long hours and meetings are happening at, at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night in order to allow them to continue with their day-to-day operations. But I think everybody is passionate about making this happen. In auditing to reconfirm the balances at the start of the year due to errors that have been found, we're having to pull items from storage. That takes time to turn that around. You're probably asking yourself, why are we doing that? We had audits before. What was the thoroughness of the prior year audit? Why are we having to do that? Well, I will tell you, and I think the gentleman asked about the GFOA award. Stockton was awarded the GFOA award the year before it went bankrupt. And so if the GFOA award has some level of significance, then why is the city going bankrupt the next year? So I would focus less on the award and more on the accuracy of the data and the thoroughness of the audit. I do believe that you're getting a very thorough audit. It's going to take time. The general ledger system that you're using is called SunGuard HTE. We had it. It's about a 25-year-old system, depending upon when you implement it. I think you did it about 18 years ago. That system itself is limited. It does not produce historical reporting. In some instances, for example, in accounts receivable, it cannot go back in time and report. It only reports as of the current date. So So if the report wasn't run and saved by staff internally, then we have to go back through the transactional records to recreate. We don't create new records, but we recreate the data from the existing transactions that are in the system. So I think where you're saying our staff creating records, we're not creating, we're actually taking the data that's available and recompiling it so that we know we have good, clean records. And then I think last is accounting policies within the city. I know that this team is really the policy task force. You've got to take a look at whether your accounting policies existed, are they being followed? Two of them are, the allowance for doubtful accounts. We do not have an allowance policy for our utility billing. We do not have an allowance policy established to determine where we're going to reserve for bad debts for some of our other AR. And so we are making some of those decisions, and those policy decisions, those are going to have to come back as part of the CAFR once this is all done to the task force for review to make sure that we're making the right judgments and getting those in, and that we're not creating new policy to change data from prior years, because consistency is important in financial reporting. Capitalization is the other one. CIP, you need a policy that the project managers look at their CIP each year and tell you what needs to be capitalized. And so really that'll be really the next phase after this audit is done, to take a very hard look at your accounting and financial policies as we move forward. And we went through the same thing. So this is not unusual. I'm in other cities currently. I'm assisting San Bernardino on their bankruptcy project. Very similar, these are when there isn't a heavy focus on finance and the importance of finance, some of these things drop off over the years. And so I think it's great that council is supporting management to take a hard look at finances and really get the fiscal house in order. It's very important for sustainability in the future. And so with that, I'm just going to turn it over to questions from the audience, and I'm happy to answer it.
And I'll start out now. I'll go to Ms. Molina first, you and then George. So I just want to make sure I'm not. We've heard repeatedly that HTE is not a good user system. So I would ask Ms. Hurtado, what are our plans for dealing with that system? Are we looking at replacing it or going to a new system, or?
Well, in January, the council graciously gave us about $100,000 to start the process of evaluating our HT system and what would be the best way to replace it. So for this current fiscal year, you gave us the money to begin that process. And each year, we will talk to, it's a huge investment. It's anywhere from $7-8 million investment, which we will bring back to you, but at least you got us started. And so we need that initial seed money in order to do the RFP to release it, so that we can start getting bids to know exactly how much it's going to cost. And when we get those bids, we'll bring that back to you. But we've started that process now. However, it will take a couple of years to implement. If anyone has gone through an ERP system replacement, it does take time. In the meantime, what we've done is you also gave us money for Band-Aids that were software that we can implement. Cognos is one software that you gave us money for that's going to help us with some of our financial systems, and we're looking at a couple of others to address some of our payroll challenges as well.
Thank you. I know it's probably an exaggeration, but it sounds like an Navas might be more effective than HTE at this point. So, Mr. Molina?
Yes, a couple of things. The HTE system is supposed to provide you financial information, and I know that I had it customized so that the public could go and pull out any financial report they wanted. Of course, that was 20 years ago, and who knows what happened to the customization. A couple of things, though, that the young lady spoke about. If she'd use less acronyms, it would be a little less boring. But on the CAFR award, no audit or CAFR award is going to say that your city is not going to go bankrupt. It says what the facts are. People looking at the CAFR, in essence the audit with additional information, have to come to a conclusion. Are we in a good position? Are we in a bad position? Are the trends going up? Are the trends going down? if the CAFR itself lit up and said, you're bankrupt, well, we wouldn't need half the city staff. The fact of the matter is, it is just an annual financial report. What is important is that the Award of Excellence says that you've had an independent body, the Government Finance Officers Association, that have looked at that, and they've determined that the information in it is the same quality and standards that they require of other cities that they give the Excellence Award to. Quite frankly, you could be bankrupt and still probably get a CAFR award if your financial statements show that you're bankrupt. So, let's not try to confuse the audience more. We're simply saying that the CAFR is necessary in the state of California because it has been codified in the California Government Code, unfortunately, that says that if you do not get a CAFR, then the city council, by law, must audit the warrants and checks that are issued on a weekly basis. And I think what the city has been doing in the past is saying, hey, look, because we get a CAFR, we don't submit those warrants and checks to the council, although they could. But if you don't get the CAFR, the Excellence Award, then you are going to be in a position where, according to general law cities and the California Government Code, your council will be required to see the warrants and checks and audit them on a weekly basis. So that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, 3 items. The first is, in your analysis, have you gone through and assessed the potential liabilities for lawsuits, and if so, how much are they? Secondly, have you assessed the liabilities for employee claims maybe made to the city of a bunch of state agencies? And third, what is the magnitude of the allocations and reserves for seawall rebuilding as to what homeowners pay and what the city pays out of different funds? That's the first question.
Is that,
And I will suggest that we don't talk about potential liabilities because I don't want to throw the fodder out there for anybody that might be listening to say, come deal with us. So we'll have to figure out a way to address that issue on some other level.
Well, these will have to go into the financial statement, right?
just to give you a general answer, I think, contingent liabilities for lawsuits and all of that is evaluated during an audit. I don't have the numbers. Obviously, that is something that we will report on in the financial statement.
And what is the progress of those 3 steps mentioned?
We have received a lot of information already, and we will be evaluating them. That's why one of the things that we are looking for, in addition, is the confirmation letters from attorneys that will provide us more information on those. But they will be reported if they are qualified to be reported in the financial statements. That evaluation still has to be done.
Okay. Second point is on ERP. The HDD system on Burke is considerably better than Abacus, I can assure you. I spoke with Keith Brooks recently, the IT director, and he told me there's about $500,000 allocated for various IT projects right now, of which the evaluation that Maria mentioned was more than $100,000. But also encompassed high-speed internet, the Oxnard project, the IT master plan, which drives the ERP and CRM on purchasing. So those are moving along. He says he's greatly underfunded and undermanned to do what the original plan was that he presented late last year, which I thought that was a very good plan. I was very impressed with that. But the $7 to $8 million total for ERP is not just software. That sounds like a total project. Am I right, Maria?
Yes.
Which would probably include hardware, software, consulting, support, and ongoing maintenance, and that'd be over a multi-year period. That's a little on the high side for a $400 million organization, but it's not out of the ballpark completely. But it's a major effort of the IT department and supporting departments to do. It's like a cause to make that happen.
And I can add to that, in Stockton, we set aside $8.5 million for the project, and we started with the initial needs assessment analysis, and RFP was issued for that, and a firm hired to come in and do that, and then work on the requisition for vendor selection. So I shared that with Maria and the IT director.
Mr. Chairman, just if I may add to that, I also went through that in Modesto. It was $7-8 million, took a couple of years to do. You want to do it right, because it takes a long time, and people train and made a darn difference. you know, one of the things, I'll just say this, one of the things that all of you in this room pretty much have indicated is like, okay, how can we spend this, how can we do that? And I think maybe we'll address a comment about, you know, what's our cash look like? That's the question today, is what's our cash look like? But we really want to land here, but it's not stopping us. We know we've got to redo our IT system. Our technology is so outdated, it's causing some of this. It's causing some of this too, is that outdated system. So absolutely, we're going to pursue this. It's kind of like, okay, let us get our feet a little stabilized on the ground. We're getting close. I feel we're getting very close to that. But this is kind of the last step in really stabilizing it. HR is quite stabilized now. IT needs help. They will be talking as part of the budget process, a reorganization. It used to be there were two people in co-controlling, you know, the department, and it was not effective. So yes, you've heard of HR, we've recently finance. The next step is you'll hear an IT plan on moving forward, and he's underfunded.
I understand there are 9 unfilled funded positions right now, and that they're having a hard time getting the HR department to focus on it as well as other priorities. That's become a major bottleneck, so it's something we might want to look into.
We are speaking of it every day.
Okay, Councilmember, did you have any questions?
Yeah, couple of questions.
Then I'll come to Mr. Molina and Mr. Labor afterwards.
You mentioned you work with other cities that have been in hot water. Can you make a recommendation with respect to software? And if you can't make a recommendation on what's good, can you make a recommendation on what to stay away from?
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I think that's an individual city by city decision.
I'm asking you because you're the individual.
Yeah, I think that what you really need to do is get the ERP out to get the needs assessment done, because every city has its own unique set of operations. I'm in the city of Beaumont. Beaumont doesn't operate a utility like you do, and so. But Beaumont has a ton of community facility districts and some problems in their debt accounting, and they probably need a really good system that'll help them with kind of the debt management process. They have other, issues as well, but every city is unique in its way. I couldn't recommend any one software, but I think, your IT department is going to be your best bet for advice, and there's really kind of some recommended packages based on how large the city is, how big the city's going to grow, and it's kind of ranked into like a tier 1 of software. Those are the Oracles and the SAPs of the world. And then you've got your tier 2 software, and most cities of your size are probably somewhere in that kind of tier 2. There's a big hype right now to move to the cloud. Everybody's pushing for cloud. I think that you've got to decide how you want it. IT needs to decide with the city manager's office and make the best recommendation on where you want to be. Do you really want to be in the cloud, or do you want to be hosted in-house? And there's costs with each one. Every option has positives and negatives to it. So you just have to get to the right analysis to make sure you make the best recommendation of the options to council.
Thank you.
Yes, you really shouldn't have a comment for it.
Actually, Vanessa pretty much said what I was going to say. The thing that I've seen in failed ERP systems is that people buy a system that is too big for their needs. They buy a tier 1 system when they really they don't have 10,000 or 20,000 employees, which is what those systems are designed to manage, or hundreds of thousands of employees. So, the first rule is get the right system that has the functionality to serve government. Make sure that it's easy to use to the extent possible, and then don't customize it. Change your own business practices, because that system has been optimized for best management practices in almost all cases.
Second question. You mentioned you dealt with Stockton, and you mentioned 300,000 population in Stockton. We're 2/3 the size, a little over. What did it cost Stockton to go through the full audit?
What did it cost them? I'm sorry, I didn't hear
To go
that.
through the full audit. Is it completed?
Is the ERP complete?
Your audit cost, can you repeat it so she can hear you? What has Stockton's?
What was Stockton's cost for the audit, and
2/3 the size. What was cost? Where did it cost audit? Where did it cost Stockton for the audit, for the entire process? And is it complete?
What is the cost of the audit for Stockton, and is it complete?
Yeah, when I was there in my first 2 years, we underwent 24 separate audits, including the state controller's office, the county for the RDA wind down, the Department of Finance for RDA wind down, our internal audits, as well as our external audits. The first year of the audit was the year in which, when I was there, it was 2011, and that was the year before we went bankrupt. And that audit took the longest because of the risks associated with it. I think it's at full cost to the audit firm. We paid something less than what it cost them. They probably took a bath on our audit. I think the total fee was around $500,000, but we came in substantially less than that, around $200,000 to $300,000. The year after that, we went to bid and we selected a new firm, and their fee was around $364,000 a year. For the next 4 years, that contract is out to bid now. That firm was able to get us caught back up on our audits. They basically continuously audited us for about a 2-year period to get all of our audits caught up and on time. And they've been on time for the last 2 years, and no audit adjustments.
Thank you. One last question. Sure. State of California came in, what did they charge for the audit?
So when the state of California came in, which was a problem, and that's all public information, you can read Bob Dice's letter to them. We had gone to the state controller to tell them that we were going to go, we were probably likely going to go into AB 506 bankruptcy process. And the next thing they did is they turned around and came out and started to audit us during the middle of the crisis. So it basically took not only my resources to respond to the current 24 audits they were doing, but to theirs as well. For the financial and internal control audit alone, they charged us $180,000, and they were there for nearly 8 to 9 months.
Thank you.
Mr. Molina?
Yes.
The only finding they had was that we had charged negative interest to gas tax in our interest allocation, and we shouldn't have, and that was an $18,000 finding. Other than that, there's nothing they found that wasn't anything we had already reported out.
Okay, and I appreciate that, but I was actually calling someone else to speak, so.
I like your candidness. Maybe we should let her answer some more. I'm interested how you got a negative $18,000 allocated and didn't catch it at the CFO's office, but let's forget that.
Okay.
The question, or what I do agree with Vanessa, by the way, regardless of whether you stay with HTE or whether you go with an ERP system, the one thing that this city of Oxnard has done, in my opinion, over the last 17 to 20 years, they have looked down on, they have diminished the responsibility in their minds of the finance staff. They have done everything they can to decimate that department. That's in my opinion. Because we started with at least 4 CPAs, and they were good. And we were able to get a good, clean audit and get it done on time, including the CAFR. Unfortunately, 3 years after I left, this city manager ordered much of the corrections to be reversed, which is why now you have open CIPs that go back to God knows when. But my point being, really, city manager, I can't overemphasize, make sure you get the quality people that this city deserves in those positions, and the licensed professional people in those positions. Even if you got to pay them a little bit more, it's going to be a lot better than continuing this kind of problem over the next 7, 8, 10 years. So just a comment of agreement with Vanessa.
Thank you, Mr. Lavery. And then I'll come to you,
Yes,
Mr. Dawson.
I have a question about these 61 items. I don't know, one of the things that one cannot gather is the order of magnitude of these, like which one of these are the most critical, crucial. And I remember Mr. Ecker a couple of meetings ago, he I don't know if he said out of frustration, but he was basically saying there's going to be reaching a point where you're going to have to start writing things off because you can't find things, and it may be affecting the general fund as a last resort. And I was wondering, where do you, in this chart, where do you reach the point where you've got to make a decision that you cannot get any further along based on the information we have, and we have to make decisions in what is the potential magnitude, the effect on the city's finances, those things. If there's any way you can quantify that or speak to that, that would be appreciated.
Okay, yeah, it will come to a point if we don't actually get the information that we are expecting to receive, that we will have to sit down, hopefully with Greg and maybe some of you, to talk about what other alternatives there are. We are not talking about that yet because we're still hoping and counting on the resources that have already been assigned to the task. And they are working feverishly, and everybody's focused on trying to get it done. And there is a tremendous assurance that we will be able to get it done. But, like you said, there's always a possibility that that we will not get it done by the time frame that we said we are going to. So that is something that is in the back of our minds. We will be talking about that as we get there.
Ms. Schroeder?
Sorry, just on Mr. Labor's question, so when you say alternatives, are you talking about administrative or financial?
It would be alternatives as to financial statement presentation, audit opinions. There's definitely a lot of different things that could happen. There will be consequences to a lot of these things. What we're trying to get at is to get to a point where we can issue an opinion on the financial statements, make the presentation, and get it done, and move on to next year. That's where we're at right now. And as far as which areas we're actually focusing on, they're on the first 2 pages of this thing.
Mr. Velazquez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alpha Vasquez. Just want to share with you a couple of things in regard to what Mr. Phillip requested. What would the state controller charge the city for an audit? Well, it ranges between $150,000 to $250,000 for the audit. The reason I know that is 2 days ago, I had a mild discussion with a representative from the state controller's office. I won't give his name. In January of 2016, I emailed him requesting assistance to try to help the city in the finances that we're in. So presently, the state controller, per our conversation, is evaluating all the requests, documentation that's been requested from the city. At this point, they're undecided whether there will be an audit. Now, based on what I heard right now, it's very critical that you have the chapters completed by May. Otherwise, there's a very good possibility things will change for the worse, or maybe for the better. So I just want to share that with you, Mr. Perello.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Nyhoff?
I think, thank you, Councilman, Mr. Chairman. I think on that question, one of the issues about when you might get to the point where you had to do an adjustment would be a time when you were unable, using detailed analysis to support the figure that's reported on the financial statement. That the amount that you're able to support would be a lower number, a lower amount of accounts receivable, a lower amount of capital assets. And if that amount was material, it would start to have an effect on financial reporting. So you would either write off the assets, if it was material, and you still couldn't support, say, the whole amount, what is it, $1.8 billion of capital assets, you might find that the auditors felt compelled to modify their opinion, to say they couldn't express an opinion on that part of the financial statements. Those are all possibilities that would have to be considered. But right now, as Ms. Casareno said, the plan is to get that information and get as much of it as possible. Most of those balance sheet items, like an accounts receivable is a current asset that has an effect on your financial condition condition that's much more important than what Mr. Miller had referred to earlier, which would be whether you made errors in your general ledger about what debt had been reported and when, that becomes less important to the financial condition and certainly the budget condition of the city. But from a financial reporting standpoint, if it's material, that's why auditors, that's why it's important now. You have to be able to issue a financial statement, and we hope to get an unmodified opinion if that happens. So there are things that are in the mix in terms of the audit that could result in reductions in cash balances or general fund balance, or could result in ongoing additional expenditures being recognized. But those still have to be brought together, and rather than speculate on the amount or size of that, we really have to get the detail reconciled and under control.
Councilman?
Two-part question. When this audit is completed, who signs off for the city of Oxnard?
As far as the representation letter from management, it has to come from Greg, from Maria, from the limited representations from each of your departments is what we're planning to. As we had mentioned.
So there's no elected officials that sign this audit letter?
No, it will be presented to you.
It will be presented, and we vote on it? We vote to receive it or not?
You vote to receive it, yes.
Second question, before the auditors sign off, will your various partners sign off on their own?
The firm signs off, the entire.
So
firm.
your firm signs
Yes,
off?
exactly.
What is the biggest concern that you have before you sign off on this audit?
Well, the main thing is making sure that the financial statements are fairly stated according to generally accepted accounting principles. The main issue I have right now that I have not felt really assured yet is the construction in progress. So that is something that I'm waiting on. We've been harping on it since day one. That has something to be, that is something that is really a tremendous amount in your balance sheet that needs to be cleared up.
Thank you.
We go to Mr. Miller, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Miller.
Who actually from finance signs off? I'm not even clear who's in charge this week. Is it Mr. Millican?
Maybe Maria could answer that question.
I'll be happy to. Maria is the interim finance director of the city. I'm the city manager. So if she's not available, I am. This is the financial director for the city.
Yeah, we have to have an interim plan while we do the chief financial officer recruitment. Dave Millican is obviously our special advisor, and he's here helping us. For the city manager's office, I'm assigned to working directly with the finance department. We're currently going through the CFO recruitment, and we brought in all of the financial expert assistants that we need to make sure that we complete this on time.
Mr. Moskowitz?
Correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is you were just hired, I believe, for the Senate here as an internal chief financial officer. I believe that's what I read. So my understanding is that it's your sole responsibility as a chief financial officer to oversee and make sure that every department head, staff members, puts all this documentation together. And when you have the captures prepared, it's my understanding that it's your responsibility to sign off, then it goes to the city council for approval. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes,
Well, you're not the CFO.
I guess for this, I was here working in the finance department, started, announced as the interim, but they actually, we clarified that because Scott Whitney served as the interim CFO. You can't really have a consultant sign your rep letter. It has to be signed by a member of the client staff person. So in the 2014 audit, Jim Cameron signed, the city manager didn't sign. For 14-15, the signatures would be city manager, Scott possibly, and Maria. But Maria will be the person in the seat when the audit opinion, when the audit is complete. And that's ordinarily the person who signs the representation letter.
If I could just add, sir, this is why Eden was saying that this year for this audit, we are making sure that each department head actually signs the representation letter, whereas we've not done that in the past. And so we've been working more closely along with the department heads so that they own the information that they're giving us, and they help us, they're working together with us. So that really is where the responsibility lies, is with the department heads, and then the information they give to the chief financial officer. And so this time, we're making sure that everybody understands their role in terms of the information they provide the finance department.
One last question. So technically speaking, we're hearing, are you or are you not the chief financial officer?
No, he is our special advisor.
I spent a lot of time doing that, but not right now.
Is it true that the CFO has personal responsibility for the accuracy of financial statements by law?
I think that the financial, as Mr. Molina said earlier, cappers are really only required if you want to not have the city council review the checks and warrants that are issued by the city. This city only issues checks, but if you don't have a capper, then you have to drop back to direct review, either based on budgets or whatever. So that's where they come into effect. They may be required by bond indentures, and they may be required by the Single Audit Act, which requires the production of a capper for grantor agencies as part of that act. And that, all of that is being updated right now. So legal responsibility for financial statements is not very clear in California law. Since there's no requirement to actually produce one, there's no described penalty, as far as I know, for failing to produce one. But you certainly have problems if you do that, possibly with the Securities and Exchange Commission, if you have publicly traded
That
securities.
brings me to my next question. No offense intended, but is Maria actually qualified to do such a thing?
Well, I don't think this is time. If you want to sit with us afterwards, we have more on the field. I want to try.
The due diligence question, sir.
I know, I appreciate that, but we've got one other item we got to get to, and I want to try and get Mr. Molina in, and then
Is there somebody here that can answer that question? Can the city attorney answer that question?
about the legal obligation.
I have to look into it.
Yeah, I think you should look into it. It would be sort of like Sarbanes-Oxley, when the chief executive officer has to sign as to internal control and the financial statements. They do that with the advice of experts. So for Ms. Hurtado, I would be one of her advisors. But Christine is also one of her advisors in that. And so there would be a due diligence process of going through and saying, can we comfortably sign this letter and make these representations that all information has been produced. And there's a long, I'm sure if you've been involved in audits, there's a long list of things that Eadie and Payne will require from the city in terms of its representations.
Well, if I may answer a little bit, as your auditors, I would certainly be glad if she signs the management rep letter. She has been instrumental in getting all of this information that we are asking for together. Without her leadership, we probably would still be in the back burner, waiting for our information to be provided to us. So she attends all of our meetings. She understands the accounting, even though she probably won't be able to do a journal entry. And I don't expect her to do that at all. The representation letter is required for the management to represent to us that this is something that was that they are owning, and that they are responsible for the financial statements. And that's really what the representation letter is.
Mr. Molina?
Yeah, I was gonna ask the auditor, the signature, and maybe you addressed some of it, it used to be under penalty of perjury, knowing that what you're submitting is false or, but there was also another statement in there that identified to the best of your knowledge and professional understanding, the information was both accurate and correct. And I think what the people were asking is, okay, so I don't know what poor Maria did to upset the city manager to put her in that position. But I feel for you. However, from a citizen's point of view, what prevents Maria from knowing that there's a problem, knowing that there's something that hasn't been prepared or presented, which is material, and still signs off in order to get the thing done on time? Not that she would, but I mean, what hook does the auditor have against city staff that what they're doing and giving you is accurate?
What's the question again? I'm sorry.
Well,
What hook do you have to get to make sure that the information should be presented is accurate?
Because we tested it. That's the proof that we are getting, the signature, there is not a fake signature, is that we test the information that is provided to us.
right, and I understand that, but you don't test 100%. You test 30%, maybe if you're lucky, and you rely on the management letter to say, hey, the rest of it in total might be material, but there's nothing in there, to my knowledge, that's not correct and accurate and consistent with good accounting processes. So, do you have any legal ability to go against individuals who knowingly sign the document, whether it's a department head or the city manager or the finance officer, when you later on find out that they knew what they were signing was false? Maybe that's the question that's being asked.
There's always a legal avenue, but
Okay.
that's not really something that we have talked about yet.
Okay.
Usually that representation letter is a defense for the auditor if they're sued about the disclosure.
Okay, Ms. Schneider had a 30-second comment, then I'll come to you, and then we'll try and wrap it up. Ms. Schneider?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to close to and say to you, Christine, thank you so much for everything you've been through and what you're doing for us.
I'd like to just say that I really have to thank the staff, because without them, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Well, I know what the pressure is like, and Vanessa, thank you, and the team, thank you, and Maria, and the whole finance department. And I think sometimes you sit in a room and you hear all the questions and challenges, and I know what you're trying to do, which is get a clean audit and get it done. And that's what Vanessa and that team is doing, and I have the utmost respect for the professionalism of those folks doing this for us, for you and what you've been doing on a daily basis. And Eden, although, you work independent of me, thanks for being on that phone call all the time and keep working this out. It's hard. It's hard for everybody to understand. It's hard for everybody to hear, but we're getting so close to saying it is finished. And we can start moving forward on this whole financial situation. If I may just, one thing that Mr. Miller asked early on was, a lot of this that's going on, how much does it really impact our budget? We got X amount of money we said we're going to spend, there's X amount of revenue coming in. How much of this says, well, really what we might find is we only, instead of 115 million in revenue in the general fund, we only are bringing in 80. Or we're bringing in 200 instead of 115. I guess what I'm saying is what we hear all the time is what's going on here will have little impact on the day-to-day budgeting process that we are going to be starting here very soon. The big concern still is where did you end up from all the years? Are your reserves, are your fund balances, are they accurate? Are they accurate or not? And if you want to just touch on that.
Well, I think based on what we have seen so far, and I'm not the auditor and have not audited, but on what we've seen so far, there are not likely to be material misstatements of especially revenues or expenditures. There could be issues relating to balance sheet accounts like primarily fixed assets. That's tied down. So with that means that in accounts receivable, possibly in the reconciliation of some of the liabilities, we'll see things that will pinch, but they're more like pinching rather than the kinds of stuff that we were finding last year, which had material one-time effects and material ongoing effects. I don't think we'll see that this year.
And this has been good discussion, but Councilman Perello has one last comment, and then we're going to move to the next item, because we really do need to get staff back to work and doing stuff, so. Councilman, we do.
I appreciate the video conference of your name is Vanessa. I'd like to make a statement first before I ask you a question, but I wanted to give you a heads up to think about this question. We work with all these various cities that have had a lot of headlines. They have to go back and redo their CAFRAs. I'd like to make a statement. Everything we are doing here has tremendous ramifications in the city, with negotiations for labor groups, with our bond rating, with the cost of money if we need to borrow it, with the services provided to residents. I'd like to ask you, did you have to go back to those cities and renegotiate or restate their CAFRA? And what's the cost or ramifications if we do that? And what is your expectations for our city in that one vein?
That's a great question. I can tell you that in Stockton in our first year, if you just added up all the adjustments and whole numbers, as to the 2011 CAFR, it was misstated by nearly $100 million. And that's whole numbers. They were netted, the entries netted in some instances. But, you know, there's a credibility issue for city manager that you've got to come forward with the information and report it out and get the numbers accurate. And so I know we were late on our financial information, and that had some rippling effects, very, very similar to the pressures you are under. But I would never, I think what's most important, and I think where the city manager and the deputy city manager and Dave are at and Christine is, we've got to get the numbers accurate. So whatever the outcome is of that, that's going to be reported out, and you're going to need to move forward with that. But the message is that now we've got the city manager in the right spot and council with good numbers going forward that you can make the decisions off of. You know, clearly, I think the budget process is the next step, and anything that we find in the audit will be rolled through there. And again, Dave reiterated, you know, likely it won't have a material impact there because we're dealing with the current operations, day-to-day money coming in and money going out. But yes, you know, coming forward with this information, you already did it once before with the 128-point plan. And your organizational assessment, and that's the start. And really, I think this is the tactical part of that plan. This is the execution of that plan, and you've got to keep marching forward. I think you'll always have critics, but I think if you keep trying to do the right thing and moving forward with that plan and staying focused on that mission, you're going to come out in the right place with bondholders. You're going to be able to issue debt in the marketplace. We issued three rounds of debt in the middle of the bankruptcy. One of them was our wastewater refunding, and that actually saved the city nearly $13 million and was submitted to Bonfire for Bond Deal of the Year, if you can imagine that. During the bankruptcy. And so there are lots of strategic things you can do to reposition the city.
What did you put up as collateral if you were in the midst of a bankruptcy, and what rating were those bonds?
Our bond ratings moved around quite a bit during the bankruptcy process.
I'm talking about specifically the ones you got this award on.
Bolstered it. So each series is rated on its own. The pension obligation bonds were completely impaired in the bankruptcy, so we lost ratings there. It was unrated at the end.
My question is, what were the bond ratings of the ones you got this award on, and what did you put up as collateral for those bonds to get that rating?
So the wastewater bonds were revenue bonds, and we moved them, I believe, from a B plus to like a AA minus, something like that. I don't have the ratings on off the top of my head at the moment, but.
Thank you.
Milton, did you have a comment?
First, the best. Can you hear me clearly, Vanessa?
I can.
Okay. Part of Councilmember Perello's question was whether or not whether you had to restate CAFRs, or the alternate to that might be did you have to go prior period adjustments to reflect corrections from prior financial reports that were discovered during the 2011, 2012?
We did. In the 2012 year, that's where we restated the prior year audit. The whole number of those adjustments, if you just added them up, was around $100 million. Probably some of the larger ones in the general fund is we had $20 million in receivables that had aged out and they had never provided for an allowance against them. The city had basically no likelihood of collecting them. For example, they had $6.5 million in parking ticket revenue that was over 5 years old that they didn't have an allowance for. So, those were the things we're looking at. We're looking at the same thing here at the city, making sure that the AR and the allowance is correct because that's an area of risk to the organization and that overstates the balance sheet. So, and that's what you use when you go to market for bonds.
That's where you go. Okay, thank you all. It was a very helpful discussion. I appreciate it. We're going to now, that was a receive and file, receive status update. We've done that, so we'll move now to status update on city's internal audit review process under items.
Thank you.
Yeah, our presenter is missing in action, but I can get started.
I think he'll be back in just a second. I have a hunch where he might jump
There he is.
Never stand up and walk out.
My luck. Work is law. You walk out of the room.
You know, that you put on the committee one day too.
Vanessa, we're gonna let you go now.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. I know that we're running a little late here, so I'll try to keep this brief for the task force. Wanted to talk today about the process for reviewing the proposals for the internal audit process. So back in July, the City Council received an implementation action plan, which essentially had a recommendation, number 57, to create an internal audit program for the city of Oxnard. And I know there's been some discussions in this group in terms of getting an internal auditor on board and reporting directly to this committee. So in January, we have finalized and sent out requests for proposals to various auditing firms and also posted that to the city's website. And we had a deadline of February 22nd. We did a conference call with the proposed bidders that were interested in responding to the RFP, and we received a total of 8 responses. These 8 firms are, kind of split between Northern and Southern California. We haven't really looked too much in depth at these proposals yet, but we do have them all, and we're ready to move forward with that. As part of the RFP, we included our proposed selection methodology, which basically includes the quality and completeness of the proposal, the quality of the proposed solution by the vendor, the experience of the staff that will be assigned to the engagement, and also the proposer's prior record of performance with similar sized cities or other local governments. We're also going to look into their references, and that's a criteria we would use for selection. And finally, the cost to the city would be a final consideration for selection of the auditor. So essentially what we're asking today is to decide how you would like to select these auditors. And we're proposing 2 options and asking for your input. Option 1 would be to have an internal committee consisting of Assistant City Manager Hurtado, Stephen Fisher, and Dave Millican to review all 8 proposals and narrow it down to the top 2 to 3 firms. And then, once it's narrowed down, have the top firms interviewed by 1 member of the Fiscal Policy Task Force and 2 members of the Internal Committee. The other option would be to have the Internal Committee review all 8 proposals again, and again narrow down to the top 2 to 3 firms. And the top firms would then be interviewed by the Internal Committee only for the final recommendation to the Fiscal Policy Task Force. At that point, that selected vendor would be taken to City Council for approval. So those are the 2 options we're asking the task force to consider for selection of the auditor.
And I guess my comments would be, I'm interested in sitting on option number 1, but not to the exclusion of Councilman Perello's side. And I know because we're a Brown Act body, that may create a Brown Act issue. What I'd like to do is maybe we can do a quick consultation with Mr. Schwartz and see what his estimate. I mean, it would be similar to a hiring panel that we may have an exemption to the Brown Act. I don't know, but you know, the one we're going to be in Greek with, if there is any Greek, would be Mr. Schwartz. So maybe we can reach out to him and see if there's a legitimate way we can do this. Not that, you know, I don't trust your information, but you know, Mr. Schwartz is the one that does all this all the time. So
I can do that outreach, Mr. Chair. It is a close issue. The Attorney General's office has weighed in on when this type of interview process can be public versus closed session, and it really hinges on the role of the consultant that's being considered. So I would definitely want to get Mr. Schwartz's thoughts on that.
okay, Councilman, do you have any comments?
Okay. I'd like to ask a question about slide 3 first, but I definitely want to weigh in on this subject. Slide 3, basically when the RFP was put out, what was the qualifications that screened various people from, what were we asking for in qualifications for the 8 that submitted?
CPA firms.
CPA firms, okay. On the second one, I totally agree with Councilmember MacDonald. There should be a council member sitting on this internal committee. No way should we not have a member of this committee sitting on that board. And I'd like to suggest a hybrid. We have one council member sit on that board, but when it comes to interview, we have both council members involved with that, and it's a public meeting process. We've already identified the candidates. I see no reason why we could not have this as a public meeting. And the transparency vein, I think this would be good for the city. That's my recommendation.
Mr. Molina?
Actually, I was just going to agree with what both of you said, except to ask, there was a question that didn't really get answered, or hopefully it did, because I agree with Mr. Nyhoff 110% that he had said to the council that this position should not report to him or anyone within his domain or to the city attorney, but must, in his opinion, report directly to city council. Is that how this position is being set up? 1. 2, the firms that you notified, obviously, apparently you sent out letters. How many total letters did you send out? And were they only to local firms, or did you send them out to any of the larger firms as well? And 3, if this position is reporting directly to the council, and it seems to me it's not too much different than hiring a city manager, where you can have your different committees set up, I would suggest, beside 2 council members, I agree, maybe you want to look at 1 or 2 members of the local profession and ask them to give you some of their pro bono time to sit in and participate in the analysis and review of the qualifications of these auditors, so that you'll have someone who knows the field as an expert to assist the committee in knowing whether or not these people are giving you smoke, mirrors, or facts.
Mr. Velasquez?
Could you answer that question? Or?
Actually, no, I don't think I can.
No, but I mean, the presenter should be able to answer those questions. I'm sorry,
I
sir.
think letters are saying-
In terms of the, I don't have the exact number of letters that were sent out. We sent it out.
Oh, I'm
to
sorry, I forgot.
The firms that replied to the audit, the financial audit, obviously, and then we had a list from CSMFO of firms that are experienced in this type of work, and we also have some local firms. So it's a long list of firms.
And you did send out letters to all of those. It's not just that you sent that out to 8 or 10, but
Correct. We solicited, meaning that we sent it out to the firms that we know exist in the marketplace, and then also posted it to the city website.
Would they be considered some of the top firms in the
Absolutely.
nationally? Okay, okay.
I may.
Hang on, Mr. Todd, do you have a comment there?
No, the answer to his first question was yes, the intent is still for this internal audit firm to report to the city council.
beautiful, thank you. I agree with
Mr. Weston?
I'd like to see a member of the public serve on this committee if possible. And the reason I say that, a couple of years back, I served in the local panel for the city of Oxnard and hired some employees. I've also served for the local panel for the school district a few years back. He selected an architect contractor in Millican High School. It is very, very beneficial to have an independent member of the public such as Mr. Molina, who has been and probably still is certified as a certified public accountant. Nothing to do with the city presently, but somebody of that caliber to give you a non-biased view in selecting a contractor, auditor, whichever it may be. What I see here, and I agree, you should have a member of city council, whether it be one or two, but to have all city staff, personally, I feel that best to have a little bit of a bias in it. We don't have a third outside party to evaluate and possibly eliminate any indirect favoritism. So that's something that I would recommend, that possibly have a member of the public serve on that panel, in addition to what you have here. Because surely Mr. Molina has more qualification and skills and certification, nothing from Mr. Fisher, than Mr. Fisher to serve on that panel. To evaluate these people out there that you have selected. That's my.
Any other comments?
Mr. Huber here.
Probably got more direction on what you're hoping for.
I have a quick recommendation,
Give
sorry.
you some
Mr.
thoughts
Chair.
for both you and Ms. Fish and Ms. Millican?
Hi, Mr. Chair, sorry.
Mr. Huber, I apologize.
My hand wasn't up high enough. Steve Huber, just a quick recommendation. Perhaps you'd like to look at other jurisdictions that have internal controllers, like the county. Might be able to have a representative to help you out, how they picked it, or some of the other cities that may have them as well. I know the county would probably help you out. I know they've helped you out on other HR hiring, so this is something that's similar. So, thank you.
Looks like we're good. So you and Mr. Fisher have your mission. We will hear something at the next meeting. Councilmember? Yeah. We will talk about item F, discuss about the April 13th meeting, 9 a.m. Yes.
I'd like to thank the Navas for filming this. I'd like to again express my opinion, the city of Oxnard should be filming this so that the residents of Oxnard get this on the city channel. The concerns from management, that if we film this event with this committee, we are not filming the others. My bias still stands. This committee and the things it is dealing with, if it's successful for the city's benefit, the rest of the organization can function. If not, the rest of the organization is going to suffer. I'm hoping Mr. Nyhoff is still here and can give a clarification as to the last time, because last night I asked him specifically before the meeting started to give a clarification of the penalty for the swaps and, of the bonds. And after the meeting, I was informed that I was correct, but I'd like it stated publicly for the record. If Mr. Nyhoff is here or one of the assistants, did you give you that? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Actually, thank you for your question. We do have copies of the memo we submitted to the city manager on February 16th related to the interest rate swap termination provisions that we have. And We have copies of that for you and the public if you.
We'll pass those out. I don't want to get into a detailed discussion because it wasn't agendized. I think we're getting into an area where we might have problems, but we will make that available to everybody here. Mr. Miller, do you have a comment?
Yeah, a statement was made about filming these meetings. If you're not able to get the city, may I suggest that you maybe get a small fee to Dan Hurtado, who's done it on his own dime for quite a while, and spends a hell of a lot of time in post-processing after these meetings too.
Thank you all of that. We will adjourn to our next meeting, which will be April 13th, 2016 at 9 a.m. Have a good day.